So coming into this week's episode of Demon Slayer, I was really hoping that we would see at least one more episode of Tanjiro surviving in this forest of doom, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by how I wasn't put off by we only got a small chunk of Tanjiro continuing his test before seeing him essentially graduate the kind of testing ceremony. The reason I loved it so much was, even though I thought we needed to see more, I think him just fighting the big demon to then the emotional closure was more than enough, because when Demon Slayer is at its best, it's when it's emotionally gripping, and not the forced emotions or things like that, but rather when things naturally click. And something I haven't personally been thinking about, and I'm sure plenty haven't, is how most of these demons, they probably started off as someone similar to our main character's sister, someone who was ripped away from society, turned to monster, and the more flesh they eat, the more monstrous they become. And what I like is how, in the closing moments of this demon's death, someone who was a complete and utter asshole in the previous episode, someone we were cheering that got killed, I love how in the dying moments, this demon sort of remembers who he was before everything went horrible in his life. How Tanjiro connects to the scent of something that's so sad, so heartbreaking. It doesn't excuse the demon, but it also reminds the viewer that this was a human at some point in time, and how this could easily become someone like Nezuko if they ate enough flesh. It's something that's quite interesting, because it starts off in this very interesting black and white aesthetic, showing you something from the past, and you're trying to piece together exactly what's going on to the realization of who this person is, to what ultimately led them to that forest and then eat more people and become more and more monstrous, but also seeing there is a human soul deep down inside, and in the dying moments you see Tanjiro praying to their god that in the next life for this soul, don't let them become a demon. It's something that's really important for a character such as Tanjiro, someone who doesn't want to kill, but has no choice to save his sister. Someone who at every chance he sees is asking demons, is there a way? Is there a way for me to save my sister? And even though they won't communicate back, maybe one day one will. And I think it's so important because it doesn't excuse the demon, but it does save the soul of the human in their dying moments, I think. And I think it's really important to have this character not come across as cliche, but someone with a heart who, unfortunately, this is the route he has to go down. He can save the world, but also give peace of mind to those very frightened souls that don't know what's happening, because for all this time, they were eating flesh because that's just in their nature, something they can't choose. But in those dying moments, it almost feels like a salvation that they can rest easy. And I thought it was such a powerful moment. And that's why I was actually pretty okay with not focusing more on combat, but rather focusing on the emotional closure for a creature I had no compassion for, but actually was like, I forgot they were human at one point in time. And it's something that's so, I think, emotionally gripping that I think many viewers will probably really enjoy. Because rather than trying to excuse the demon, you remind the viewer that they were once human. And learning in this episode that essentially the reason Nezuko has been sleeping for so long, I thought it would have just been an exhaustion thing. You know, they can't eat, so they're gonna pass out so they don't die. But it definitely seems like the reason she's sleeping is to gain her strength back. She's sleeping instead of eating flesh, which is, I think, the best route they could go for a character, as rather than making it typical, it's showing her will and resolve to not turn into a monster. Because when you get turned into a demon, your natural instinct would be to eat. That is what she wanted to do, but you can see that in the beginning stages, there is still a human soul deep inside, and because she has her brother, she's not willing to completely go into a fit of rage and let her natural animal instincts take over, and rather she's going into this deep hibernation to survive so she can stick by her brother. That reunion scene, it really reinforces everything, that her love for her family is what's keeping her human even in a demon form, and if that doesn't touch your heart, I don't know what will. The idea of how this monstrous beast got his closure to seeing how Nezuko is really trying to survive for her brother, that's really amazing, and you know there's gotta be other demons out there who do have some human level of soul deep down inside, and you know it's not going to be hopeless for Tanjiro, but it's going to be a long journey. And even though his training ended pretty quick, you also can look at it as his training's never going to end. There's plenty of ranks he has to climb up. Every challenge that he faces will be a test in its own right. So not keeping the focus in this forest sequence is actually the good move. You're not dragging things out, but you're giving emotional closure, enough action, enough setup and character development to actually make it feel like nothing was overlooked, even though I thought we needed at least one more episode. But seeing the direction they went, it was perfectly acceptable and better than what I was anticipating, and that's how you know this anime is doing something right. Not to mention the comedy in this episode, probably the best I've seen. There's only really two moments that were kind of comedic, the first of which is one of the people who survived this test, when everyone's getting their messenger birds, he gets like a sparrow. It's not like explained why, it's not really highlighted past his reaction being very confused and also fearing for his life, but it actually got a chuckle out of me because it was just natural comedy that after this life or death situation, he's freaking out, he's shitting his pants, and then he gets like a sparrow when everyone else gets like a crow. Like, it's something that's humorous, and then at the end when he's getting his sword, you got this like clown mask guy who's just ignoring Tanjiro, kind of giving him the details on how he made his sword because he's so passionate, and you're just seeing this very natural humorous sequence play out to the building up of he could have the legendary fire red sword, to then it's just black and they're all disappointed. Like, it's just the natural things that make the show funny. The shonen comedy, when it's kind of more not so in your face, a little more subtle in its kind of delivery, it's when it gets the best laughs out of me. When it's really in your face, I find myself maybe not loving it as much, but this episode, with how serious and emotional it was, the comedy actually kind of fit hand in hand with all the serious and more really impactful moments that this episode had. I think even just seeing Tanjiro stand up for this doll of a character who I'm sure some people might want to say was kind of like the knight in shining armor moment, but I actually viewed it as really just reinforcing who Tanjiro is as a character, whether that be a female, a male, anyone. Like, if they're gonna get, you know, insulted and basically attacked by someone who they're supposed to work with, he's gonna stand up for them no matter who they are. And I like it also reinforces that he is strong. He did his breathing techniques and almost broke this guy's arm. I mean, granted, I don't even know if these people are human, if they're artificial, if they're created, or if they are human but just really emotionally disconnected from reality. I don't think they were in any real danger, nor do I think they cared that this guy was shaking them up, but I did like the moment between Tanjiro and him because this guy probably thought he was a big hotshot to learning that this guy could probably kick his ass, not to mention Tanjiro was the first one to pick his ore because he smelled the kind of connection. And it feels so weird to say that, the whole like smelling thing, but it actually is a really cool mechanic in this world, the sense of death and just despair, but also how it can lead you to the connection that you're supposed to form. It's a really interesting mechanic. I mean, the whole crow sequence, like, apparently they can talk like a parrot, which, I mean, in a world with demons is not to, you know, be a real big surprise. We've seen way crazier shit in this series, but I like it. It was such a great episode. Like, watching this week and last week, it really is such a great arc for Tanjiro and just the emotional connection. I mean, seeing his mentor just so happy, embracing Tanjiro and his sister at the end, something he never expected. A student coming back home to knowing that this demon that's kept taking so much from him, that each time a pupil would come to his aid, he would make the test harder and harder to pass, and Tanjiro was able to make those sacrifices worth something, give those souls peace of mind so they could rest easy, knowing that the monster that kept killing all of these students wouldn't kill anymore. This test was brutal though. Very few seemed to survive. I doubt they were able to run for their life. I expect most of these students died. We're getting a lot of glimpses and kind of foreshadowing to the person behind this organization who's truly kind of pulling the strings and the whole ranking system, knowing that each time Tanjiro goes into like basically a quest, he gets these quests from his bird, it's going to be a life or death situation. It'll be interesting to see how his sister will play a factor, because if she gets enough sleep, she probably can be a valuable weapon, but she probably also has to sleep for most of the day, so it's going to be interesting to see how they balance that, but also show how they're going to continue to grow and evolve, because clearly the sister is still there. The fact that she's not eating flesh, it's keeping her in her most human state, and the fact if she can just keep sleeping, it'll be pretty interesting to see how they'll go, if she'll ever be able to remove the muzzle, essentially. It will be interesting. I think they got a lot of possibilities, and just, it really was an emotional episode, and it wasn't forced emotions. It was something that naturally we built up to feeling like, I understand why Tanjiro's so sad in this demon's moments, because he's kind of sensing the actual human within him, and this easily could become his sister, and we love his sister. Most of us probably do, thinking she's unfortunately was dealt the worst hand you could be dealt, but still, we could see her becoming something like this, and if a demon hunter killed Nezuko, we would want them to show compassion and pray for her salvation in her next life, in her reincarnated state. Like, that's something I really like about this show, is that when it wants to be emotional, so far, 9 times out of 10, it's actually had natural emotions come out from the viewer, rather than just saying, here's a sad moment, you have no emotional connection, this is just a brand new character, here we go again. No, we build up to things, and I think that's why it makes that hug sequence so emotionally gripping. It just brings a tear to your eye, because not only we see a brother and a sister reunite thinking they would never see each other again in a more human form, to then his teacher coming out being so happy that they survived. It's such a great sequence, but this episode overall was built on great sequence, whether that be the comedy, whether it be the action, or whether it be just the more drama hitting moments. And this is probably the only time I recall in quite a while where an anime, because this show from time to time, it will show you like a 30-second recap of the most important moment of the previous episode, that being using the slashing technique, which was so basically an eye orgasm is how you can put it. This is the first time in quite a while that I rewatched that recap, because usually I just skip over the recap because I've already watched the previous episode, I don't need to see that. But that water technique was so visually interesting that I had to rewatch it. It was only 30 seconds, mind you, but still, like, I could have rewatched 5 minutes of last week if they wanted me to. That's how great it looked. And the more techniques we see, the more I'm gonna love watching this show. Not only is it visually interesting, the reason I'm loving this show more and more is because I love the emotional development between our main character, how he's not being dealt this very cliche hand. You can have the red sword, you can have all the bullshit you would typically expect with a character such as this, but also seeing how his sister is going to kind of evolve over the series, and she can't even talk, and I'm feeling like I'm understanding her on an emotional level, which you know this show is doing something right if I can come out 5 weeks in saying something like that. For everyone who watched this week's episode of Demon Slayer Mangaritas Anime Originals, what did you think? Let me know down in that comment section below. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.